Fred would go on to marry Rosemary on January 29th, 1972, at the Gloucester Register Office. He would lie on the marriage certificate, claiming he was a bachelor. The only person in attendance was Fred's brother, who acted as best man. The family would then move from their Midland Road home to 25 Cromwell Street, while Rose was pregnant with their second child. The exterior of the house wasn't much to look at, but on the inside it was very spacious. There was a garage, a garden, and a large cellar. Fred had some pretty nefarious plans for this cellar. But to help pay for the home, the couple would take in lodgers. On June 1st, 1972, Rose gave birth to May June. For additional entertainment and income, Rose and Fred would take advantage of the large population of West Indians in Gloucester. Shortly after giving birth to May June, Rose began working as a prostitute, operating her business under the name Mandy from an upstairs room at the Cromwell residence. Fred highly encouraged this behavior and would take erotic photos of Rose, running them as ads in magazines. The room where Rose conducted her business was known throughout the household as Mandy's room. It had several peepholes, allowing Fred to watch his wife as she entertained her clients. And this wasn't as a means to ensure his wife wasn't hurt. It was purely for self-gratification. He also installed a baby monitor in the room so he could listen from anywhere in the house. Mandy's room contained a private bar and a red light outside the door to warn those in the household that she was not to be disturbed. The only key to this room was always in Rose's possession, as she wore it around her neck. Her husband would also install a separate doorbell to the house, which clients were instructed to use whenever they visited. A lot of the money earned from Rose's prostitution business was used on home improvement projects. But this venture wasn't only for money, as sometimes it was just for pure fun. Rose would have casual sex with male and female lodgers in their home, as well as those Fred encountered while at work. Rose would go on to brag to several people that no man or woman could ever completely satisfy her. While engaging in these activities with women, Rose was known to gradually increase the level of brutality to which she subjected her partner. These acts would include partially suffocating them or inserting increasingly large dildos into their body. Rose would become excited if the woman resisted or expressed any pain or fear, but then she would ask, "Aren't you woman enough to take it?" Her husband would also usually participate in threesomes with his wife. The duo took pleasure from pushing women beyond their sexual limits, typically during sessions involving bondage. They would even admit that they found gratification involving a strong measure of dominance, pain, and violence. The Wests would soon amass a large collection of bondage, restraining devices, magazines, and photographs. They would later expand their collection to include videos depicting bestiality and graphic sexual abuse of children. By 1983, Rose had given birth to 8 children. At least 3 of these children were conceived by her clients. But Fred accepted the children as his own. As the children got older, they wondered why their skin was darker than that of their siblings. Their father would simply lie and tell them it was because his great-grandmother was a black woman. By the time each of the West children reached 7 years old, they were assigned numerous daily chores to perform in the house. They were not allowed to go outside and socialize. On the rare occasion when they could socialize with other kids, It was only allowed in the presence of their parents, and they would have to follow some pretty strict rules. If they disobeyed, this was met with serious punishment, which almost always meant it would be physical. Mostly, the violence the children suffered from would be inflicted by Rose. While the violence was never justifiable, sometimes it was completely baseless, careless, or inflicted for the sole purpose of Rose's gratification. While she was always quick to jump to violence, she would always take care not to mark the children's faces or hands during these attacks. Rose's son Stephen was mopping the kitchen floor with a cloth when Rose accidentally stepped into the bowl of water he was using. She instantly became angry and hit her son over the head with the bowl. As this wasn't enough for her, she repeatedly kicked him in the head and chest, shouting, "You did that on purpose, you little swine." Another instance of Rose's violence happened when she became angry about a missing kitchen utensil. She grabbed a knife she had been using to cut a slab of meat and would repeatedly inflict light scour marks on Mei Jun's chest until her ribcage was covered with light knife wounds. Mei screamed, "No, Mom, no, Mom," as Heather and Stephen stood by, helplessly sobbing. Between 1972 and 1992, the West children had been admitted to the Accident and Emergency Department of local hospitals 31 times. Not once were any of these instances reported to social services. The children weren't the only targets in the household when it came to physical attacks. Apparently, Rose would also go after her husband. In August 1974, Rose chased Fred with a carving knife in her hand. Fred would run into a room, slamming the door shut behind him as the knife embedded itself in the door. Rose's fingers slid down the blade of the knife, almost severing 3 of her fingers. In response to this, Rose calmly wrapped her hand in a towel and said, "Look what you done, fella. You've got to take me to the hospital now." But the abuse wouldn't end there. The home improvements that Rose worked hard for funded her husband's dark plans for the cellar, a soundproof torture chamber. Their first client for this room was Fred's 8-year-old daughter, Anna Marie, in September 1972. Anna was forced to undress, but as the frightened girl hesitated, Rose tore her clothing off. Fred and Rose would go on to tell her she was lucky that she had such caring parents who were making sure she could satisfy her future husband. Her hands were then tied behind her, and a gag was placed in her mouth. Rose held her down as she encouraged Fred to rape her. The pain from the attack was so severe that Anna would miss several days of school. She was also warned by her parents that if she ever told anyone about what happened, they would beat her. But this abuse didn't end. She would also be strapped down while her father raped her during his lunch breaks. On occasion, Rose would sexually abuse Anna Marie and would later feel extreme gratification in having the young girl perform degrading acts. She would bind Anna Marie to various items of furniture, then encourage her husband to rape her. And she would force the child to perform household chores while wearing sexual devices and miniskirts. The following month, the Wests hired 17-year-old Caroline Owens as their nanny. The couple happened to pick her up one night along a secluded country road as she hitchhiked home from her boyfriend's house. During their conversation, they learned that Caroline disliked her stepfather and she was looking for a job. So they offered her to be a part-time nanny to 3 of their children, with the promise that they would drive her home every Tuesday. Caroline would eventually move into 25 Cromwell Street, sharing a room with Anna Marie, who Caroline described as being very withdrawn. Caroline, of course, noticed a few questionable things. Rose would explain that the reason there was a steady stream of men visiting her at all hours was because she worked as a masseuse. Caroline also recalled Fred telling her he was skilled in performing abortions, should she ever need such a service. He would boast of the many abortions he performed, and the women were so overjoyed they would offer him their sexual services as compensation. She also recalled the patriarch talking about sex incessantly, as he and Rose tried their best to seduce the girl. When she began receiving these advances, she was repulsed and informed them that she was leaving. As the Wests knew Caroline had a penchant for hitchhiking, they prepared a plan to abduct the 17-year-old to satisfy their disgusting needs. With the abduction, the intention of raping her was a must for them, and the possibility of murdering her was a very likely scenario. But obviously the true purpose from Fred's standpoint was rape. But he also wanted to see if his wife was truly willing to help in the abduction. So on December 6th, 1972, the couple put their plan into action. They lured Caroline into their vehicle with an apology for their conduct and offered to bring her home. She didn't realize just how severe a mistake she had made. The young girl initially believed the Wests were being sincere in their apologies. Rose would climb into the back seat with her, stating that she wanted to have a girls' chat while Fred drove. Her real intent was to fondle the girl, while Fred asked whether she had just had intercourse with her boyfriend that evening. Caroline protested, at which Fred stopped the car, called her a bitch, then punched her. When she was knocked unconscious, he and Rose bound and gagged her with a scarf and duct tape. Caroline stated that while at Cromwell Street, she was given a drugged cup of tea to drink before she was gagged again, after which she was subject to a prolonged sexual assault from Fred and Rose. She recalled Fred stating that her clitoris was unusual, and he lashed her genitals with a leather belt. When she screamed, Rose smothered her with a pillow, restrained her neck, and began performing oral sex on her. While going through this torture, Caroline finally realized that the more she resisted, the longer she would be attacked. So she stopped resisting. The following morning, one of the children knocked on the door of the room she was being held in. Caroline screamed for help. Fred threatened that he and Rose would lock her up in the cellar and allow his black friends to have their way with her. And when they had finished, he would bury her body beneath the paving stones of Gloucester. He further claimed that he had killed hundreds of young girls. The pair then calmly asked Caroline if she would consider returning to work as their nanny. She immediately accepted the offer, seeing it as a way to escape. She started to vacuum the house to show that she was willing to work in the household. But later that day, Caroline would find her opportunity to run away. At first, she was too ashamed to tell her mother what happened to her. Her mother was obviously worried when she saw her daughter come home with welts, bruises, and she had lacerations so deep it went down and exposed the last layer of skin, where it's just fat and connects your skin to your muscles and bones. It was all the way down. Caroline would eventually break down sobbing, telling her mother what happened. Her mother immediately reported what happened to her daughter to the authorities, and the Wests were arrested and charged with assault, indecent assault, actual bodily harm, and rape. That case was tried at Gloucester Magistrates Court on January 12, 1973. But Caroline couldn't face her perpetrators, so all charges pertaining to her sexual assault were dropped. The Wests agreed to plead guilty to the reduced charges of indecent assault and causing bodily harm. Both were fined €50 and were allowed to walk free from court. Caroline was so upset by this news, she attempted to commit suicide. Soon after, the Wests would become friends with a 19-year-old seamstress named Linda Goff. Fred became acquainted with the girl through a male lodger in early 1973. Linda would become a frequent visitor at the Cromwell residence, and it is believed she would engage in affairs with two male lodgers. Linda moved into the Cromwell Street home on April 19th to become the children's new nanny. It was then, or around April 20th, when other lodgers in the home were told that Linda was told to leave the house after she hit one of their children. A claim that would be repeated after Linda's mother contacted the Wests to ask where her daughter was. She seemed to have just vanished without a trace, but in reality, she was murdered. Fred dismembered her body, removing her fingers, toes, and kneecaps, before burying her in a pit in the garage. Her body was discovered in the most horrendous way that speaks volumes of what this poor girl had to endure before dying, which we are going to talk about at the end of the episode. The Wests were celebrating their success. They walked away with nothing more than a slap on the wrist for the abduction and rape of Caroline Owens. They murdered Linda Goff with no one becoming suspicious and no police being involved. Then in August, their son, Stephen, was born. By November, they would go out looking for another young girl to gratify themselves. The couple went out on November 10th and happened across 15-year-old Carol Ann Cooper, who had just left her boyfriend's house, a girl who was placed in the care of her grandmother after her mother passed away in 1966. They abducted the young girl, amused themselves with her, and after a week of putting her through absolute hell, they grew tired of her. They strangled or suffocated her, dismembered her body in the same old fashion as the other women, and then buried her. Fred continued on his home improvement projects as he enlarged the cellar and demolished the garage to build an extension to the main house. It was of no concern to him that he decided to make these improvements at strange hours. But these improvements weren't as innocent as everyone thought.